Welcome to the Coffee and Counseling Podcast, where two licensed psychotherapists give you their unfiltered opinions on mental health, wellness, life, and everything in between. It's real, raw, and ready to challenge what you think you know. Get ready for some tough love. Before we begin, just a brief disclaimer, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and does not take the place of therapy. We hope you enjoy today's session.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session of Coffee and Counseling, where we don't spill the tea, but the coffee will be piping hot while we talk about all things counseling. We're your hosts, Rachel Steinhardt
and Stephanie Schaick, and today we're going to be answering more of your questions that you have for therapists and therapy as a whole, and kind of the behind the scenes when it comes to therapists and their experiences. So grab your coffee and let's get on into it. Rachel, what's one of your high and lows for this week?
Okay, I got this. So I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but I am like the kind of person that growing up, a lot of the time when I would wear pajamas, it would be like a cut up t-shirt from high school and like a random pair of shorts or a random pair of pants. And by the way, for those of you who say like you sleep without pajamas, that probably will change with children if you're planning on having them, because that's no longer an option. But I've always kind of just been this person that just paired two like random things together and like put it on. And I was like, this works. This t-shirt from this concert when I was 15 and this like t-shirt from this, like, if you know, from this Shabbaton and like 2010, this will work. And this thing when I graduated, like all these random things. And I don't know, like I woke up one day and I was like, I don't feel like a woman. Like I don't feel like a grown adult. It's just like the vibe wasn't vibing anymore. Mm-hmm. And I just was like, you know what? I think I've had like 3 kids. I think at this point I deserve some real pajamas. And I've definitely gotten them like here and there. Like I was something I always gifted myself, like a new pair of pajamas with every child that I had, because also it needs to be nursing friendly. Mm-hmm. But as you know, from anyone who's like postpartum, like that whole time frame destroys anything that you wear, between the milk spills and the burp spills and whatever. It's just like you still have it, but it's no longer a cute situation. Right. So I don't know. I just kind of like woke up one day and I was like, you know what? I am getting myself some new cute pajamas. And I think I went a little bit overboard because I went to Ross and I think I bought like 7 pairs.
Oh my gosh. But Rachel, I am so glad you made this transition, because I went through this like earlier last year where I'm like, I do think that it's like a level of respect for yourself to like have this nice like pajamas.
It was so funny because like I thought like my husband is not the type that like he's the biggest heart in the whole entire universe, but he's not like a fashionista. So he's not the type that like appreciates clothes, or like definitely not appreciating money spent on clothes. Not even that I'm a bougie person, but I was like, oh my gosh, I'm coming home with this like entire thing. He's gonna like be like, Rachel, what did you do? It was actually so sweet. I think he was so happy to see me so happy, because I was sitting there like rummaging through it. I'm like, okay, maybe I should return these. Maybe I should return those. He goes, no, sweetie, like you're going to keep all of them. You're going to enjoy it and like feel good in it. And then I've had such a find. I found, the company Uggs, like the boots.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Ross had an Uggs robe.
That sounds so comfortable.
It was the most comfortable thing I ever put on in my life. And I was like, this is way too luxurious. Like, I am not, like, this is not.
When would you use it in Southern Florida? Like,
oh, no. So it happens to be that my house is like below zero, the way that I like it.
Got it. Okay.
And in the morning when I am getting up before I actually want to get up, because my kids are my alarm clock, and it's like I'm up before the sun and I still want to be in bed, that would be the time that I would be wearing it. So like the first 1 to 2 hours of the morning, where I'm like with my kids and I have to be functional, but I'm not functional, and I'm most definitely not getting dressed, but like my cute little PJs are not going to cut it if I'm not snuggled in my bed. That's where it would be, that's where it would be useful. So I'm like still debating whether or not to keep it, but my husband was like, no, you deserve this luxurious robe. And I was like, babe, thank you. But whatever. It was definitely like, right, we talk about like loving the small things and getting excited over the little things in life. But yeah, it really like made me feel so excited. And I was like, I can't wait to wash these and wear them. And, you know,
Yeah.
just like feel a little bit better in my skin. It really is. It's so funny because a lot of the time when I do confidence work with people, right, we talk about the internal work, but I think sometimes we don't talk about the external work. And what I mean by that is not like shrinking your body or needing to
Right.
look like somebody else, but just doing things within the external part of your world, whether it's self-care or clothes or makeup or whatever, that make you feel good in your own skin, right? And I think something we talk about a lot in like body love and body image work is if you have a closet full of clothes that don't fit you, for the love of God, like get rid of them
Yeah.
and go change them. Or, you
Donate
know, when
them, give
you're,
them a new home.
yeah, or like don't not size up because you feel shame about wearing a certain number. Like wear the thing that fits you, that makes you feel good, that doesn't make you feel like you have to squeeze into it, or whatever it is. So my point is just like the power of buying something that makes you feel good in your own skin, whether it's physically for comfort or for the way that you look, or just like me, like feeling like I need to be more of an adult. And this was
Mhm.
like, it was time for real pajamas. It's crazy, like the power that had. I was just like so excited over pajamas.
Yeah, no, but like that is such a like a level up, it feels like, where you're actually just giving yourself something to feel comfortable in, but also that you feel good in. Like that's
Yeah,
so major.
100%. So that was definitely has been my high, and I'm very excited to enjoy them. My low, without a doubt. Okay, all my therapists out there who need to finish their CUs. Hello, I'm still confused why some people call it CEs and why some people call it
I
CUs.
always say CE, so I don't know either.
CEs,
Continue
am I
again.
getting it wrong? Therapists, comment and tell us what why am I not figuring this out? I don't know. But anyway, I was completing like a really complicated training for complex trauma, where at the end of it there was like an over 100 question test that I needed to complete, that was very intricate and very difficult, and without completing and passing the test you don't get the certification. I finished the entire test online and then it disappeared and I needed to do the entire test again.
This, I swear, this only happens to you.
Happens to me.
Like, what
Rachel
the
and technology are not friends.
heck?
I really wanted to cry. I looked at the screen and I'm like, okay, God, we're going to try this tomorrow. Like, I'm not even, I think I just looked and I was like, I'm not going to have a mental breakdown. We're going to walk away.
Yeah,
Tomorrow's a new
all you
day.
can do.
I was just like, you know what? It's great. I'll have the information more shoved into my head and like make sure it's. I just I knew if like my brain started taking this and going to a negative place, it wasn't going to end well. So it was so funny. It was like the new, because of the way I've rewired my brain. It was like my new defense mechanism was I started getting flooded with positive thoughts. My brain was
Mm.
like, this is perfect. You're going to like really know the information and you're going to make sure that like the second time you take the test, it'll be even faster because that means that like you really learned it. And if there's something that like you didn't know, it'll give you a chance to stop and look it back. And that was like my first thoughts. And obviously I was frustrated that I had to go through it because I don't exactly have extra time over here.
Yeah,
But yeah, guys, rewiring negative thoughts is a real thing. And it works with time and practice and time and practice and
totally.
overcoming the little evil little evil voice in your head.
Oh, I'm
But
so
yeah,
sorry
I'm
that
not gonna
happened.
lie. Even with all the positive thoughts, that will definitely have to be my low. It wasn't exactly convenient, but
No, totally.
we persevered. But Steph, what about you? What's a high and low for you?
I would say that my high and low for this week definitely are intertwined. Rachel and I were talking about this before we started session. I had to bring three of my cats were due for their annual medical exam. And as I've talked about before, like I absolutely hate doing them. I do them because I want to make sure they're healthy and safe and all of that. But it creates anxiety, and also they act as though you're tormenting them. So it just feels horrible that you're doing this to them and this and that. But so it just was not fun leading up to it and bringing them, but everything looks good. So that would be on my high, and just getting it over with. I do have to wait for some blood work, nothing that they were concerned about, just like checking in on it. So I'll be happy when that's all done. But I have a big relief so far of just like being done with bringing them and getting them home and everything looking pretty good. So that would be my high there. Then, like I said, the low was just like the anxiety leading up to it and doing it and
Yeah.
bringing them, and then them giving me the cold shoulder for a little bit.
I'm glad to hear that they're healthy and happy.
Thank you so much. All right. So, a little bit about why we wanted to cover this. It seems like you guys are really interested in just the behind the scenes of the therapy world. And it's something that Rachel and I could talk so much about. So, we're excited to go into today's session and answer some more of the questions that you have, and keep sending them over to us, because we can keep making sessions tailored more toward these types of questions. It seems like you guys are really interested in it.
Yes, and today we're going to get very juicy and I think answer a couple of questions that I think a lot of therapists would be a little bit scared to answer, to be
Mhm.
honest with you. So
I'm a little
buckle up,
nervous.
guys. Buckle up. Let's get into it. So let's maybe start with our first question, which is, does every therapist go into a specialty that they personally struggled with or that a loved one struggled with? And I think that this is not only a question, I think this is actually a little bit of a stigma where it's like, oh, like you're in it yourself or you're dealing with it. And that is why like you chose that thing because your own life experience was the biggest teacher, which that part I really don't disagree with. I think that life has taught us things as therapists that a book never ever could.
Mhm.
So, it's valid. And it's a great question. But Steph, what do you think?
I think it is a really great question. And I would say that there's a good chance that the therapist who goes into that specialty might have personally had some sort of struggle. I think that there is something that kind of lends you to be attracted to a certain area or subject matter. So it's certainly a possibility. And I would say that, I mean, not to throw people under the bus, but I have personally kind of witnessed certain specialties and then like how they might just handle things, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And like when they start to go into more of their story, I hear quite a lot where there's some personal experiences. And personally, one of my biggest specialties is with eating disorders. And I know growing up, like I definitely had struggled with body image and diet mentality, and it really became something that I was attracted to in some way. And for people who have eating disorders, when you are involved in it, it's kind of like such an interest. So you could take it and really go into your eating disorder with it, or you could take it and work on healing and work on how you can help others. And for a long time, I knew I wanted to be a therapist. And then it just so happened that by nature, like all the assignments that I could choose, all the projects I could choose, were always going into eating disorders or body dysmorphia. It was just such a natural interest for me. And I do believe that I have some personal insights that really lent me to want to be working in that field.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think for me, it's like I've actually, as you're talking, I've kind of witnessed something. I'm really curious to hear what you think about this stuff. First of all, for as a general answer, I think the answer is 100% yes. I think 100% that um, a lot of psychotherapists are going to go into the thing that they've lived through, that they've experienced, that they've overcome, they whatever. And something to, just side point, something to keep in mind. If you ever hear someone as a therapist talking in a way that would suggest that they're like still struggling and they're working on this thing, which unfortunately is a very serious reality,
Hmm.
um, trust your gut, because
Yeah.
unfortunately there are people who are treating these things. And I'm not going to say that they're having hard days, because everyone's going to have hard days in the things that they've struggled with. That's totally fine. But if they're like actively still in something or actively still struggling with something to the point where it could potentially be affecting their work, or like you can sense something is like weird, please trust your gut, because chances are you're right. And Steph and I are very, 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 very familiar with that, and
Mhm.
open to, we were very, we saw very clearly that happening in things that we've experienced, and it's very disturbing, quite frankly. So if you're seeing that, Definitely go for it. But I'm wondering what you think about this stuff. Something that I feel, and this is completely an opinion, this is not based on anything, but I feel like people who are like master's degreed therapists, where like, that talk therapy is the end all be all, are a lot more inclined to do this than someone with a doctorate. I don't know why, but I've kind of noticed that people that have doctorates, they could still go into it for sure. I'm not saying not, but I see it a little bit less because I think they come at it with such a like research, science based, data based, testing based mentality, where a lot of the time I do see them just pick some random topic that interests them or interests them to study or interests them to test. And it like legit had nothing to do with them. But I'm wondering if you've noticed that at all, or am I completely making this up?
So actually, like that's really interesting. I'm going to be more mindful about that because I actually haven't really noticed. I think that I would say that a lot of people in my immediate orbit, with the exception of a few, are master's levels
Yeah.
People. And I guess also when we were talking about the masters, when it comes to this, it's all about mental health counseling. Like those are the
Right.
degrees that we're going for. And for the doctorates, they're normally doing testing and all of that. So, but I would be really curious about this. And I know that we talked about, or I don't think we talked about on the podcast, but my sister, who is a doctorate in psychology, and she listens to our podcast. So I'm going to have a conversation with her and see what her perspective is on it. Maybe she has an interesting, unique perspective.
Yeah. I was just something that popped into my head as you were talking, and I'm like, is this just like a random thought that I'm having, or is this based on things I've actually seen? I'm not fully sure. But,
so interesting though.
Generally, when something pops into my head like that, it's generally an accumulation of things that I've noticed. So I'm wondering.
Yeah.
But,
Well, I'm going to be cued in now.
yeah.
So the next question is, what do you think about clients ghosting you?
Oh, I love this
So
question.
I know, I think it's such a good question. And I just think about, I mean, from the human perspective, yeah, it does make you feel some type of way and worry a little bit about like, well, did I do something wrong? And just like you, just like anyone who has someone who ghosts them, obviously this is not a burden that you need to take on, but generally speaking, it's best not to have that happen. If there's a reason that you are no longer wanting to see a therapist, I know it's so like we want to try to hide from it and not actually have a conversation. But at minimum, it's the best thing for you and a good exposure too for you. Instead of ghosting, it's just to at least let them know however you correspond with them. If you leave a message or you email them, just be like, I no longer want to continue sessions. At minimum, ideally, it's really great to do it in person or virtual, however you meet with them for your sessions, and have a closing session and talk about why this might be happening. I understand that there might be some situations where like maybe you really are, this is just a bad experience with this therapist or whatnot, and you don't even want to do that. I mean, sure, there might be moments like that, but generally speaking, it's a good idea to say something. But yeah, it doesn't feel good, and it definitely can make us question ourselves. That's kind of my perspective on that.
Yeah. I feel like I have a split brain when it comes to this question, because on the one hand, I think of it like we're providing a service and you have the freedom to, at any point, like say you're done with the service. You don't have to give a reason, an explanation. You don't owe anybody anything. And if you're uncomfortable or you don't like it or whatever, you have every right to be like, bye, Felicia, and get up and leave. That being said, you're in a service where you're creating, a relationship with someone. And whether you believe it or not, the person, for the most part, right? Again, if it, like Steph said, if this is feeling like a weird or unhealthy or off situation, I'm not talking about that. But in the general sense, you're building a relationship with somebody that we care, we worry, we're listening to the ins and outs of your entire life. And aside from the fact that obviously, yeah, like for the human part of it, as therapists, it doesn't feel great. I mean, and depending on, your confidence level and how many years you've been in practice, it might not necessarily make us question our like ability as therapists, but it doesn't feel good. It's just like, you know what, like you would feel if you were ghosted, it just makes you feel a little bit blindsided. But
Mhm.
I think the thing with me also is it's scary,
Mhm. Yeah.
especially if you're somebody that has been talking to your therapist for trauma or depression or severe anxiety or suicidal ideation or anything like that, and then you ghost your therapist.
So scary.
It's a horrendous feeling.
Mhm.
I've experienced it one time
Mhm.
with a client who did fall under a lot of those categories and more. And I still think about this person, and I
Mhm.
still like pray truly that this person is okay,
Mhm.
because they have every right to have pieced out. But obviously, I want to know that they're safe. Like, it's not even about, why did you leave or what happened, because we had built a rapport for over 2 years.
Mhm.
So that's a scary thing. And again, like if this is something where you did see the client for a long time, like I just said, yeah, your brain kind of it leaves your brain spinning a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. At least like just let your therapist know that you're okay.
Yeah.
That's really important. And another aspect of being like ghosted is I can imagine that if you're ghosting therapists, you might be doing that in your life too. And that's something to
Mhm.
address because it's
Yeah.
really not the most interpersonal for interpersonal effectiveness. That's really not great. And that could be something to be worked on. And that might be a really great exposure for you is at least having that conversation to end things, so to speak, with your therapist. So an opportunity there.
That is such a good point. Like if you're ever going to do something scary, like face your fear of confrontation, I don't think there's anyone better to do it with than a therapist. Like
Totally.
anything, you're going to get the ideal response,
Hmm.
unless honestly, if your therapist is like really cuckoo riku cocoa for cocoa puffs,
We're not
then
helping.
we're not applying it to you.
Hmm.
Um, but next question, Steph, do you ever get to a point in a session where maybe you're met with a question or a thought or a comment or a story, and you're just like, I don't even know what to respond to you right now. Or like, I don't even know what to do with that.
Hmm. I am trying to think of any examples. I am absolutely positive that I've come across this. I'm trying to think of any specific examples. But normally, if I'm at a point where that is the case, it generally is because there was just so much that, like, there's
Mhm.
not even a way for me to be able to respond without it being even more chaotic. So it's
Yeah.
like, let's take this like one by one, like, and let me explore a little bit more about this thing because I can't give a response or anything that's going to be appropriate in the sense of like it's helpful because it'll be probably more so where I'm coming from a place of chaos because I'm trying to take everything in and respond. And I think that we can definitely get in that trap as newer therapists. I know I definitely have gotten there more so where I'm like trying to
Mhm.
respond to everything and being more seasoned. It's like, okay, I know what the issue is here that we need to like parse through this a little bit more and become more specific. So those are the biggest examples that I can think of where
Mhm.
I see this happen. What about you?
First of all, that was the first thing that came to my mind. Like
Mhm.
sometimes I had a session recently where like I literally was like, "Oh, how was your week?" And a client spoke for almost 30 minutes nonstop, going
Mhm.
on different tangents that had nothing to do about their week at
Mhm.
all. Um, and just like going through an array of different things throughout their life. And I was like, uh, my brain was like running like with the
Right.
person. And I think, yeah, this what you made is such a great point of in the beginning, if I were not as seasoned of a therapist, I would have been completely overwhelmed and a complete loss of words.
Mhm.
But essentially, first of all, I think it's very great for therapists, especially if you are newer. So here's just like a tip. To a degree, you let the client know where you're at. It could be like, you're providing me with a lot of information,
Mhm.
and I really want to give all of these things the time and attention that they deserve. But we have to kind of separate them and focus on one thing at a time. And so
Prioritize.
let's pick something to focus on today. Or what do you think has been the thing that has been most prevalent to you in this past week or in this past year, if it's a new client or whatever it is. And sometimes they'll say something that I'm like, that in itself is an entire 3 weeks of therapy.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll say, I really want to take that thing that you just said to me and we're going to pin that. And I really want to return to it when we're ready. So I help them also out loud, like we're organizing the thoughts together. So I think that that's one place where that can happen, where it's like you're just met with so much information that you are playing the organization game. And then, like Steph loves to talk about, like going on the hierarchy of needs in terms of what is important.
Yeah.
And then there's the type where someone says like a sentence or a phrase or a word or tells you something that happened and you're like, whoa. It's either really heavy or it's the first time you've heard something like that, or you're not really sure what the person meant, or you were taken aback by it, or you were blindsided. Like there's so many different things.
Right.
I think in the beginning also, like that if it could freak out a new therapist. And I think now what happens is like I take three, like I think, I don't know if you experienced this stuff, but in the beginning there's like you feel like you need to fill the silence, which is something that in grad school they teach you, but it only comes with experience.
Hard,
like it's so uncomfortable. And as a more seasoned therapist, you become comfortable with sitting in silence. And so you are a lot better to take 3 minutes to compose yourself and process what this person just said to you and then come up with an appropriate response versus like trying to respond in a panic. And then a lot of the time saying something that doesn't make sense, is inappropriate, doesn't match what the person just said, is not empathetic, is judgmental, whatever. So I feel like those are the two things where that could come up. But the experience of that, like, do you ever get to that point? Totally, we got to that point. We're even like Chat GPT is going to have glitches sometimes. You know what I'm saying?
Like, what are we saying?
Right. Like as much as information and psychoeducation and experiences we have, we're human, just like the person sitting across from us. It's not like we're never going to be met with something that doesn't make our brain go, wow, okay. So even if it's just like, that's a lot. And sometimes I say to the client, like, wow, that's a lot,
Yeah.
And that's really validating to the client.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if it feels like that much for you, imagine what it feels like for it being in their head.
Right.
I mean, obviously that's why sometimes just unloading it all can be so truly helpful. That's why journaling can be helpful as well, or some form of that. So Rachel, the next question is, do you ever have a hard time empathizing with a client? And if you do, how do you deal with that?
Okay. Therapists, if we're not all in unison on this, you are lying to yourselves. I want to say I would probably identify myself as one of like the most empathetic people. Like one of the number one traits of me, for better and for worse, is I am one of the most empathetic people. And 100% I find myself hearing things certain times, or like someone telling me a story and I'm like, should I repeat that back to you? Because I don't know if you realize how that landed. Yeah, I definitely have moments where I have to like say something to myself in my brain and then try to view it with a different lens to get myself to the point of having that empathy. And it doesn't come up as naturally. 100%.
Yeah, it's a really hard question to answer because for me at least, because I'm sure that there have been moments where it's like, okay, like we could differentiate when like this would not do what it's doing to you, it would not be doing to me. And it's like,
Right.
I could be like, oh, that's something that maybe I have a hard time fully understanding why this would impact you in this way. But that's a me thing. As a therapist, we're trained to try to get through that and still be able to connect with the client. So with that being said, we might have a hard time fully grasping how something might be impacting you in the way that you're presenting that it's impacting you. And therefore it might be a little bit of a different way of us approaching it. But I do believe that at the end of the day, what we're able to do is still whatever is bringing you to this point. It's so much more than just a situation that you're presenting, that some things that might impact you might not impact me because of the state of mind we're in. It probably would have impacted me in earlier times in my life. But again, it doesn't matter at the end of the day when we have the tools to be able to say, well, this matters to you and we can work with that and deal with that. And I don't necessarily need to understand that or feel the same things that you're feeling in order to be able to help you. So I hope that kind of answers the question there.
I think you said that so beautifully, but it makes me want to ask you a more specific question,
Go
which
for
is
it.
because this is something that has come up for both of us a lot in session. So I'm very curious to see what you think. Like, for the situations where we have worked so hard with the client to make a certain decision, not make a certain decision, do a certain behavior, not do a certain behavior.
Yeah.
And, like the kind of thing where it's like, not I told you so, but like they knew what they were doing and they actively did the thing or didn't do the thing or whatever it is. And then they're coming and like you're sitting in the session and they're crying. And this is like the 150th time you've been on this merry-go-round dealing with this same issue. And like, how do you deal in
Yeah.
those moments?
So
Because
first,
when I hear this question, sometimes that is like one of the biggest things that would come up.
yeah. So first off, I could just say that like 3 words into you starting talking, I knew where you were going. And obviously I wanted you to finish so that everyone else could hear where you're going with that. And yeah, that's hard. It's really hard to keep bringing yourself to having some level of empathy to be able to do the work because we're still in this stuck point. But of course, as a human being, it could be frustrating because it's like, well, we know this is you, this is brick wall. And when I keep seeing you running into the brick wall, I wish I could just steer you and just say, just do this. But we talked about this, and this is kind of like that whole thing, like doing advice versus like trying to like flat out saying things versus trying to steer. We've talked about that in a bunch of different sessions. So sure, I mean, that is hard to keep watching and really have the same level of empathy as you would have maybe when it first came up. Doesn't mean we can't help you. It doesn't mean that we're judging you in the way that like, oh, this person like or something horrible or anything like that. Obviously, we recognize that it's a struggle for you, but just like I'm sure that there are people in my life, and maybe Rachel, you probably think the same, that there are certain things that you do and that they're probably like, come on, just like stop doing that or whatnot. And you can still love a person and
100%.
or care for that person.
I could think of people around me in my own personal life that I can adapt this question. And I'm just like, the compassion is there. Like, it hurts me to see the person continuing to hurt, even if it's based on the decisions or that they're making or the same, I don't want to say mistakes, but like sometimes it really just is like mistakes or whatever it is. And I don't think that if you're not empathizing the same way, that you don't have love or compassion or the ability to help or the ability to offer support. So I definitely want to clarify that you could still very much do the work. But I do think the level of relatability and like really being able to not think to yourself like, oh my God, like please, we've talked about this 100 times.
Yeah.
To pretend that that's not an experience when that's happening to me is silly because like you're human. And I think that those feelings are going to come up for you.
Yeah. So the next question is, do you psychoanalyze everyone around you? I know. So this is so funny, and I think that a lot of people feel very insecure when they find out like you're a therapist, or potentially insecure. And I've gotten people like saying, "Oh, you're just like psychoanalyzing that person." I'm like, I really don't think I am. I think that this is like completely like obvious to like anyone, like this is an issue with this person or whatnot. But people want to insist that you are psychoanalyzing people around you if you have any sort of, I mean, maybe we have different words for it. So I guess it makes sense that people might perceive it to be we're psychoanalyzing because we're better with the language around describing what we're finding.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, there might be some things that it's like you might be very curious about a person that's like a stranger or whatever, and maybe psychoanalyze a little bit. But I mean, it's not like we are just like going around and trying to get into everyone's brains and, get them to tell us all their personal like secrets or something like that. I think everyone kind of thinks that we're like a surgeon that just goes in and takes it out or something like that.
Right. So it's interesting because, like, I think that it's important to define what we actually mean when we say that.
Hmm.
Because when I hear that question, my initial thought is 100% yes, I do. But I'm
Hmm.
going to explain what I mean by that, right? So Stephanie just said something really important. We're not trying to sit there and get everyone's deepest, darkest secrets and fix their problems and dissect every single thing that they're doing.
Hmm.
But, and at least I'll speak for myself, because of who I am and what education I have and the way that my brain has been naturally and also externally trained to think and to um, just become aware of things that I think not everyone else is aware of. You just will experience humans
Yeah.
and behavior differently. So I could be sitting at a table and turn to my husband and notice something within someone within 5 minutes. And my husband will be like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "What do you mean you didn't like realize?" Or I'll be able to tell really quickly if there's like tension between spouses, or be able to, or I'll see someone act in a certain way. And my initial thoughts are like, "Oh, what did this person experience to get them to be like this?" Or when, or like it's not like I'm trying to. I'm not sitting
Right.
there with a magnifying glass. It's my automatic brain. Like I met with certain sentences or thoughts or experiences or behaviors, and my brain goes, "This means this, this means this, this means this, this means," and it tries to kind of create understandings, because that's, I mean, a lot of us, it comes naturally, which is why we went into this field. But
Hmm.
on top of the fact that it comes naturally, it's how we've been trained.
Yeah.
So um our brain just like comes down to all of these thoughts that I think people who aren't in therapy just don't think like that. But I will say this, I think people look at it as such a negative thing, and I've
Hmm.
actually found that it's an extremely positive thing, because what it ends up resulting in, at least for me, is I give a lot of people a lot of the time the benefit of the doubt, because
Hmm.
I see certain behaviors that I think would upset or irritate or just honestly like piss off a lot of other people, or they would take it the wrong way. And I meet it with a lot of curiosity and compassion and like, oh, I wonder like what this person's day was like that's making them act like that. And I'm not going to sit here and sound like a saint and say that like I never hear something and it rubs me the wrong way, or I don't get irritated or whatever. Of course I do. I'm human.
Hmm.
But I'm a lot more inclined to get curious behind what is behind this behavior or what is behind this person, versus like jump to a judgment, or
Hmm.
just base everything else off of something that someone said when they were maybe having a bad day, or I could have taken it the wrong way. So my brain will go into the therapy mode a lot faster, and that will result in a lot of the time a healthier relation to other human beings.
Yeah, I think that what you had said too, like how your brain kind of automatically goes to these types of things, I think it can be really well, uh, like aligned with, if that's the right word, or well described rather, as when you play an instrument, you see music and you see the notes and you think in terms of the music, and
Yeah.
you're trained that way. And or if you speak another language, or you speak your native language, we think in that language. And I think that when we have, obviously, like you said, we're naturally inclined, most of us, that's why we came into this field. And then it was, those skills were so honed through years and years and years of school and training and all of that, where it just is like how our brains, the language our brains think. And I feel like I love the way that you say that it's not necessarily like a negative thing or anything like that. And also, I find just kind of like in a humorous way that this is like what makes like travel and like waiting bearable for me. It's like if I'm sitting in
Yup.
the airport, I just start watching people, and I know it's kind of creepy, but I think we all kind of do it to some
We
extent.
all people watch. Therapists just people watch on another level.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's what keeps me, sane when I'm waiting for the plane after TSA, and I'm like there for the longest time. So it could be a fun entertainment thing too, for and no harm, no foul. I'm not doing anything with those people or upsetting them in any way.
100%.
hmm
Steph, do you ever think that clients, okay, guys, this is really gonna be this is really gonna ruffle some feathers. So bear with us, but you know us, we're really, really unfiltered. So do you ever think a client is being dramatic or overreacting?
Okay, so short answer, and in specific circumstances, I could say yes, that might be a thought that crosses my mind. Now, let me explain that further. That is something in and of itself, that is something that can be a part of certain disorders.
Yep.
And that's what we need to identify so that we can properly treat it. So that's not, I think that these words are very inflammatory when we use them in just like normal life, like, oh, you're overreacting or you're being dramatic. It could feel extremely invalidating, and it's not really being used appropriately, or maybe it's just thrown around now so much that it has such a negative connotation. But from the perspective of a therapist, if you might be having a reaction that's like a level 10, and the circumstance probably would make sense to have like a level like 4 to 7 reaction or whatever. I know I'm using numbers just to try to illustrate it. Then we might need to be like, well, why are we having emotional regulation issues? Are we having catastrophizing, which is a cognitive distortion? We need to be able to identify it so that we can do something about it. So we're not here saying, oh my gosh, this person's just a drama queen or whatnot. But it's going to be helpful for us to have some of that information to maybe say, okay, maybe there is something else going on. And assuming that it's always coming from a place, like a genuine place, we want to help you. We're not like that. We're going to try to find out what the actual problem is so that we can really help you to feel more in control and regulated with your emotions and your reactions as well. What do you think, Rachel?
You said it so beautifully. I think you hit the nail on the head. The short answer is 100% yes. Just me being real with everybody. But this really makes me think of, I remember when I was younger and I would always hear adults talking about children's behavior as like attention seeking.
Mm-hmm.
And growing up as a therapist, I would see a lot of behavior that's also aligned with attention seeking, quite frankly. And this really makes me think of that. And this might not be for attention seeking. Sometimes somebody may be quote unquote overreacting or saying something in a very dramatic way because they do not have the tools of emotional regulation. They're overstimulated. They have other things going on. And sometimes, like Stephanie said, this is absolutely a part of the disorders that they're struggling. And like I'm not the biggest fan of slapping disorders onto everything, and neither is Steph. So I'm not going to say that every time somebody does this, they're struggling with a disorder. Right. But the same way that you can have symptomology of a disorder, or you could be struggling with something. So for example, you can struggle with getting stressed pretty easily and not have an anxiety disorder. Mm-hmm. And that can, in turn, bring about certain characteristics or make you react to certain things in a certain way. Same with depression, same with symptomology of ADHD, same with symptomology of a personality disorder and not necessarily having one. So I think to answer the question, the answer is yes, but also we look at that as we look at almost everything really with curious eyes as to like, what is making this person be overly dramatic or overreact? And clearly there's something here that needs attention. But I also think there's a part of it where it's kind of like that person needs to take accountability for themselves. And if they're being provided with the tools and the psychoeducation and awareness that, there are better ways to deal with it, there are better ways to cope, the tools of emotional regulation, an awareness and an understanding that maybe the thing that happened doesn't really match the reaction, and they're dead set stuck in their ways. I think that goes for anything in mental health where it's like, you're actively choosing to stay right where you are.
Yeah.
And going back to like the empathy question, that's kind of where you lose me a little bit, because I'm like, you're just refusing to do absolutely anything to better your situation, better yourself, do the work. And so that's where I think the answer shifts a little bit as to, once you have all of that and this is still a thing, you're, instead of this becoming something that you can work on and change, you're actively making it a part of your character trait.
Yeah. And something else that might be important to note here is that sometimes reactions might be more in line with what's age appropriate. So when I have teenage clients, perhaps someone who is older might say, oh, wow, like this person's like really overreacting. Like their friend just like stopped talking to them. It's like not a big deal. It's like one friend or whatever. But really, when you think about it, like that, this is their world. And
Yep.
someone at, 13, 14, 15 years old or a little older, a little younger, I mean, something like that maybe we can put in perspective as adults who have had some life experience, they can't. And that's something that it's so important to, that's where I think a lot of times being dramatic or overreacting really does become an invalidating experience, because it's sometimes, I find so many people disconnect with being younger. I try really hard, and I think it really helps me in my work as a therapist to try to connect with the different moments in my life that I can remember that when I was going through this or when I was that age, I probably would have reacted the exact same way. And what would it be that I would want to have heard or I needed to hear? And I try to incorporate that and keep that in mind when I'm acting as a therapist. But we need to be mindful that, again, sometimes there's different things that might cause a reaction that wouldn't align with what you think is a normal, quote unquote, reaction.
That was such a great point, Steph. I'm so happy that you brought that up. The age appropriateness and remembering, if you're not a therapist and you're hearing this, maybe you're a parent and you're like, yeah, I knew it. Like my kid, my teen, my whatever's overreacting. It's such an important thing to keep in mind that what seems like an overreaction for you at this point in your life might not be for the person that is having, the moment. Like I know when my toddler sometimes is throwing themselves on the ground and banging the floor and their head on because I'm not giving them what they want. I also realize they're tired, they're hungry, they're overstimulated, and they're in the middle of a situation where they're unable to be emotionally regulated on their own. And so sometimes I'm like, I remind myself, okay, they're 3 or they're 4. And instead of me like losing it, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so dramatic.
Yeah.
I will literally just pick them up and hold them for 2 minutes. And all of a sudden, all of that cuckoo-ness like exits their brain.
Aww.
And they're able to respond, because sometimes they just don't know what to do with all of their discomforts and feelings. And the same can be true to different degrees for different stages of life. So that's such a great point, Steph. I love that you just brought that up.
Yeah, it's just age appropriate. All right, last question, Rachel. What do therapists really write in their notes after session?
I love this. I feel like everyone's always saying, what are you writing in the dang notebook? Honestly, this is a very simple answer. We are writing a combination of, I think, 3 things, which is sometimes clients write questions that like follow-up questions to something that you just said, because they don't want to interrupt you, but they also don't want to forget where they're taking that or their point, or to bring something up. And we can get so lost in what you're saying because we're such attentive listeners that we can forget the thought that just came up for us to keep that session productive and keep it on track as to where we want it to go. So that's one thing that if they're jotting during session, that could be happening. Another thing, especially in the beginning stages, is we're literally jotting down the information you're telling us. We're building a new relationship. A lot of therapists are seeing a multitude of clients. They want to make sure they're not forgetting anything. And a lot of the time, a lot of things in the beginning, when you're building that rapport, you're dumping or trauma dumping so much information. Sometimes it takes months or even a year after that session to get to some of the things you talked about, because there's so much happening in between that time, between building the rapport, getting to other things that you haven't talked about, getting to the present time here and now. And then something might come up in the future and you look back and you're like, wow, I forgot that this person mentioned that they went through this thing like the first time we ever met each other.
Mhm.
So, building up really that history of the things that you are experiencing, things you have experienced, things like that. And then the other one is, quite frankly, we have to fill out notes for
Mhm.
either insurance or just for licensure requirements and whatever, that helps us keep up with what you're doing, what we're talking about, what our treatment plan is, what things that we suggested to you within the session. First of all, for like legality issues, but also to keep ourselves accountable that we're still doing productive work. We're talking about something that makes sense. There's an actual plan of treatment with where are we going with these conversations. If the client, I know Steph and I are very, very into homework. If the client did homework, a lot of the time, what was in the homework or what was talked about or where the conversation that came out of the client's homework, which a lot of the time brings incredibly insightful information, can also be jotted down as parts of the notes that you're taking. But I don't know, Steph, if I left anything out, if you're writing something else down and you can educate me.
No, so I think you did a really great job. So like a couple things that I would just like add in here, just for perspective, there's
Yeah.
reasons that we have to keep notes.
Yeah.
There are, if you as a therapist accept insurance, the insurance might require that a lot of the times. Not the notes themselves, but I'm not too familiar with the exact way that the insurance companies work, but I know that there are certain circumstances, like for an example, if a therapist is working for a particular place that's not necessarily like individual therapy, but more so like some sort of assistance in any way, sometimes they need to keep their minutes or whatever. I'm not too familiar with that. I'm sure there's a lot of therapists who can speak more to that. So I'll speak more to the reasons I keep notes. Is that one, legally we need to do it. God forbid we were ever subpoenaed because we were in one of our clients was dealing with a court case and they needed their therapy notes. We need to be able to have records that we store them. Fun fact is we don't actually have to release the notes themselves, but we do need to have them and we can interpret them and hand that over if that were ever needed. So the notes really should just be for our eyes only. And I use it to remember certain things and also as a processing tool. Like after our session, while I'm writing my notes, I'm remembering and it's committing to memory. And also I'm having different insights that might pop into my mind. So a couple things that I'm putting into my notes is some like basic facts as to what we talked about, kind of just like, oh yeah, client and I, we had talked, or client and this therapist, to try to sound more professional, talked about how they're worried about handling their family coming for a visit. We talked about this tool, using that tool, whatnot. If there's any read that I'm getting from the client that's out of the ordinary, I'll put that in there as well. Like if they were unusually tearful that day, okay, it might be something that I need to keep an eye on. Like, are we heading into something that might be more than just an event that might be making you more sad? So keeping a record of that so that I can always go back and say, this has been a couple weeks now that we've been experiencing that.
Yeah.
Honestly, I probably don't need the notes to do that, but the notes is something in case I'm ever wondering or worried or whatnot, it's something that I could put there. I'll put in any ideas that I want to come back to or introduce to them in a next session, some things I want to follow up on. If they told me that they had a date coming up on Friday, I want to ask about how'd it go? Like, was there anything you want to talk about with that? And then also, like, if there's anything that I need to like reach out to them for in between sessions, like any type of correspondence, if I need to collaborate with their psychiatrist or something like that, I'll put all of that in the notes and when our next date is. So it's pretty straightforward. I think it's pretty straightforward. I mean, obviously we're therapists, so maybe that seems like second nature to us, but maybe it's surprising for clients. So let us know what you think if you have any questions further about that, because I know it could feel really weird that we have notes about you, but I hope you all know it's safe. It's we always have like HIPAA compliant places where we keep our records. So just be mindful about that. No one's going to be getting in there. All right. So, guys, because we just answered some of the questions, we just want to remind you that normally at the end of our normal sessions, we have a time for responding to one of your questions. So if you have any questions for us about any topic, or even suggestions, by the way, for any future topics that we could talk about, but any questions, you can direct them over to us on our Instagram at Coffee and Counseling Podcast, or email them over to us at coffeeandcounselingpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening to our session today. We are curious if you have any other questions specifically for therapists, like what happens behind the scenes. We are fascinated with the questions that you guys come up with because it's something that's so second nature to us. So anything, questions that you have that you want to learn more about, let us know. If you think that anyone else in your life would find this session informative, educational, helpful in any way, please consider sharing it. And you could check out the show notes for all of our contact information and all the relevant information. And again, thank you guys for tuning in.
Thank you guys for being here. Please subscribe, like this video, and put any questions or comments below.
See you next Tuesday.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Please follow our Instagram at Coffee and Counseling Podcast and send any questions you have about any topic to us via direct message for a chance for your question to be featured in one of our next sessions. You can also email us your questions or topic suggestions at coffeeandcounselingpodcast@gmail.com. Make sure to check out some of our other sessions available to you right now. Once you drink up all of those and your coffee, come back next Tuesday for our next session.
The information shared in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute therapy or mental health advice. Listening to this podcast does not establish a therapeutic relationship between you and the hosts. If you are in need of support, we encourage you to seek help from a qualified mental health professional. This podcast is not a substitute for individualized care. We do offer individualized therapy. If you're interested in individual therapy with one of us, please visit our practice website and send us an email to set up a free consultation call. All of the links and our contact info will be in the show notes.